Welcome back to If You're Fat, Lose Weight, and we are honored to have one of the great baseball minds, both in business and in the sports itself, a teaching assistant professor at UNC Chapel Hill, recently at St. John's and NYU, a current writer at Forbes, where I give myself a 0% chance of ever being written about, a man who has appeared on the MLB Network, Bloomberg, ABC, NBC, Fox, CNN, Sportnet NY, and yes, but is about to reach the pinnacle of media with his appearance on If You're Fat, Lose Weight, the great Professor Wayne G. McDonald Jr. Welcome to the show, my man. How you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Joel. I am so honored and proud to be here this afternoon.
Well, just give it 5 minutes, and you'll tell us if you still feel that way. Well, we appreciate you joining us. This was our first foray into baseball. I'm a sports fan. I used to coach in the minor leagues of basketball. And on this podcast, we talk about sports, we talk about politics, we talk about whatever is interesting to us that day. So, if you want to go off topic at any time, feel free. But we're really interested today. I wanted to have you on to just talk about the upcoming baseball season. Obviously, there are some rule changes that they enacted that are going to take place this season, and I'd love for you to take us through the first, the three rule changes, and we can just have a conversation about it.
Sure. I think the big thing is the pitch clock, obviously. Mm-hmm. Baseball's had a very serious problem in terms of games going too long. And now what we're seeing is the implementation of the pitch clock has actually worked out pretty well in spring training. We're seeing games cut anywhere between 25 to 34 minutes in length, which is huge. Yeah. Which, it speeds up the game, which is great, builds a lot of momentum. I'm a big proponent of it. I really like it. The next big change is the bases, otherwise known as the pizza boxes. The average fan is looking and say they're pretty big. But two key reasons that why baseball has done that. One, for safety. We've seen a lot of plays on the bases, runners going in with their hands, can get stepped on, broken bones. And the other thing is to increase the stolen bases. Right. More momentum, more excitement on the bases, which I'm a big fan of. And the third is the shift. I call it the infield shift, because teams are already finding the gray area and doing an outfield shift, particularly if you're Minnesota Twins ball player Joey Gallo. Mm-hmm. He's already seeing shifts in the outfield. So essentially, the infielders have to stay on the dirt and on either the left side or the right side. If you're a shortstop, third baseman, left side, first base, second baseman on the right side. So those are the three big changes. I think there's a lot of difference of opinion based upon who you talk to. Most importantly, it's about excitement. It's about enthusiasm, more fan engagement, and also people don't want to sit for a 3-hour ball game. Mm-hmm. I think basketball works so well because 2.5 hours, and a lot of excitement, a lot of energy,
a lot of action.
Yeah, exactly. Baseball for me is a beautiful game, but it's really slow for a new generation of fans who are so accustomed to watching an NBA game and seeing all this excitement, and it's over in 2.5 hours. You go to a baseball game, 3.5, 4 hours is commonplace, and then it's a very hard television product or a streaming product to put on air to engage with a new audience of fans.
Right. Okay. So you said a lot there, and let's get a little more granular here. So the pitch timer. So they're actually putting a timer between pitches now, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but with they put a 15-second timer with the bases empty. Mm-hmm. And a 20-second timer with the runner with any runner on any base. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. And with the pitch time, with the pitch timer, they also said a hitter gets one timeout per plate appearance, and he must be in the batter's box with 8 seconds left on the pitch ticker thing, on the pitch timer. Thank you. Yeah. Good English. And so I think that's really interesting. And then also the pitchers get 2 disengagements, which is either step off or a pickoff attempt. And so it's a little more nuanced than just a pitch timer. And I think you see, to your point, I think what you've seen is a real emphasis on speeding up the game in all the other major sports, and a real emphasis on offense. And I think that's what you're kind of seeing with these new rules. But certainly the speeding up of the game is the idea here with the pitch timer. Did I get all that right?
Absolutely. I think what we're trying to see here is there's a lot of athleticism in baseball. And over the past several years, we've seen a diminishment of it, not because of lack of talent, because the talent is there. It's just the strategy is different. The strategy is about launch angle, exit velocity, trying to hit the ball out of the ballpark, defensive shifts. We don't want to see more strikeouts in the game than hits. Right. Okay, and that's what we've been seeing. And it's a boring game to watch. It's not an exciting game. I think, I harken back to the days of like a Ricky Henderson and a Tim Raines and players like that who were just electrifying on the bases. The talent is in the game, without question. We have it, but it's just not being encouraged or activated properly. Essentially, what we're seeing with the changes, which you nailed them perfectly.
Thank you.
Is that we want more excitement and enthusiasm in the game. And it's not because of a lack of talent. The talent is there. What it really is we need like a little bit of a spark to get it going again. Past several years, it's been about launch angle, exit velocity, hitting the home runs, but that's a proliferation of strikeouts. Strikeouts are boring. Strikeouts take a lot of time. And now what we're seeing is the bigger bases are going to encourage stolen bases. And the defensive shifts are going to probably encourage hitters to hit a little bit differently. Obviously, strategy is still there, but it got to the point where the game was getting very boring. It was getting very stale. It was about three outcomes: home run, base on balls, or a strikeout.
Right.
And there's a lot of athleticism in baseball, a lot of amazingly talented ball players, but they're not maximizing their gifts because of the way the game has been currently played in the recent years.
Yeah, I mean, there's been such a heavy focus to analytics with what you just said about strikeout, base on balls, or home run. Everything's launch angle, exit velocity. I grew up in San Francisco, in the Bay Area, as a San Francisco Giants fan, and we're going to get to Barry Bonds here a few different times in this conversation, I hope. But we never heard of these like terms, and I'm not some like old guy get off my lawn type situation person. And analytics have helped all sports a lot, but you can go too far with some of this stuff. And as a fan, somebody who watches sports for enjoyment, which is all I do now. I used to work in sports, but now I watch just pure enjoyment. The only team that I can watch play baseball is the San Francisco Giants. And because I don't find the game as interesting, and I think they're long overdue to kind of insert some of these rules.
And it's sad to hear from a smart person like you that you're not consuming it the same way I am. And look, I'm a proponent of the analytics, but within moderation. I'm a big believer that moderation is the key to life, and particularly in sports. And I've seen it both ways, where you've had some people within the game with that get off my lawn mentality of I don't want to hear about the analytics. And then the others that are just so beholden to an algorithm that they forget that there's a heartbeat in baseball and that human beings actually play the game. And, there's a lot of magic to it. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we're going to see pure athleticism come back to baseball rather than the proliferation of strikeouts over the hits. I want to see the extra base hit return. I want to see the stolen base return. I want to see the action on the bases. I want to see disruptive forces on the bases. And as I mentioned, the talent is there. It's just a matter of reintroducing it to the fans, because at the end of the day, we like ball players like Ricky Henderson and Tim Raines, and who are electrifying on the bases. But a generation of baseball fans have not seen players like that, even though they are presently in the game. They're hiding and they're waiting to come out.
Right, right. That's a good way to say that. So just so we're clear, they have dummied all of these rule changes in the minor leagues. As a former minor league basketball coach, they did that in the minor leagues of the NBA as well. And sometimes they would enact the rule changes that they tried out in the minor leagues, and sometimes they wouldn't. For this, they had the pitch timer in last year in the minor leagues, and it reduced the game length by 25 minutes. And so, from my perspective, you see it already 20 plus minutes in spring training. I think it's going to be much more, during the season, just because, in spring training, they don't look guys off as much. They don't step off the mound as much. There's not many pickoff throws, blah, blah, blah. When the games start counting, they do more of that. And I think some of these rule changes will help that.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Totally agree, because I think, to your point, perfectly said about spring training, people are getting excited about the numbers now, but remember, it's spring training.
Right.
And it's very encouraging, don't get me wrong, but let's talk in April and May and see how it goes. But, if we're seeing 25, 30 minutes now, don't be surprised if that number sells around 20, 22 minutes at the outset of the season and gets progressively better when we get into the summer months.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, and then you said the thing about the bases, and one of the things that you read about. So first of all, they're making the bases bigger by 3 inches, right? From 15 inches to 18 inches. Is that right?
Yes, it's bigger now. It's like a pizza box.
Okay, so in essence, it shortens the length. This is one of the things you're reading between all the different bases: home to first to second to third to home. Blah blah blah. Great. And I guess that'll make there be more stolen bases. And they've actually tested this. They said that. Where's the stat here? Oh, well, do we have a stat? I don't even know if we have a stat from the increases in stolen bases. Do you know that stat? I don't have that stat.
I do know that it's been tested, and then because of the size, it's more of an encouragement to steal, because what you can do in those cases, say if you're stealing second base, you can slide to the outer part of the base, and those 3 extra inches,
It's helpful.
It's very helpful. So in that case, but also too, it's about the injuries as well.
Yeah, I don't really understand that. That's what I was going to get to next. That's the one thing I don't understand. Why this prevents injuries? So,
well, if you look at it from this perspective, so Major League Baseball's done a very good job of trying to avoid a lot of that heavy contact into the bases in recent years. We've seen a lot of dust ups at second base and barreling in, even at home plate,
because of Buster Posey at home.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly, and that was horrifying.
Yeah,
regardless if you're a Giants fan or not, baseball fan,
totally.
It was horrifying. But these extra inches, 3 inches, add strategy, where now instead of saying I have to go directly in on this angle, I have a little more real estate to play with, and maybe I can go with my hand in a certain position rather than in another position that I did beforehand. So it's more, and also too, it's about the bang bang plays at first base. How many times have we seen the ball be thrown to first base and there's a bad angle, and we've seen players get separated shoulders and dislocated elbows and everything. So it gives a little more flexibility of how you want to field the ball coming from another position ball play within the infield. So those 3 inches, people are going to say, it's 3 inches. It matters a lot in those instances, because we've seen too many of those quick plays at first base where first basemen or the runners are getting hurt because there's not enough room in terms of the strategy. But the 3 inches will make a difference.
Interesting. Yeah, they have a stat here that it reduced injury events near the bases by 13% in the minors in 2022 compared to 2021. I think that I don't know that I buy that stat. I mean, I'm sure that it's a correct stat. I'm not sure that I buy the premise of this, but I'm not that smart, and maybe they certainly know more than me, but that's okay. Okay, and then the shift. So I grew up, like I said, we're going to talk about Barry Bonds a few times. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you remember, Wayne. I don't, but to me, the shift started with Bonds, where they put the second baseman would go play like shallow right field. And maybe it was just the most pronounced with him. And then the shortstop would come over and play second base. And he would never try and bunt, down the third baseline. The third baseman would move would move to like the shortstop area. He would never try and bunt, but occasionally he would go opposite field to hit a home run, which for the uninformed, meaning he would try and hit a home run to left field, which in theory, then you should be able to slap the ball on the ground towards the left side of the infield where there's only one defender. I am in a real, I think this is long overdue. The idea that you can put all of your infielders on one side of the bag, it's just wild. But I don't know. What are your thoughts there?
Well, the funny thing is, I agree. I like the strategy within reason, though. The shift, actually, the origins of the shift go back to Ted Williams in the late 40s.
See,
there was, they called it the Boudreaux shift. So he used to be the manager of the Cleveland Indians at that time, now the Guardians, in about late 40s. And Ted Williams was the quintessential pull hitter. Mm-hmm. And so what they would do is they would just overload the right side of the infield, and a guy who had hit 360, 370 is now hitting about 320. And it worked. It worked effectively and then also too, Williams had the same thing. I'm not going to go the opposite way. I'm going to hit through the shift. And then I've had conversations with some Major League ball players. They've said the same thing, because you're always asked, why not drop down a bunt? Why not, let the fastball come in on you and go with it a little bit more to the opposite side if you're a left-handed hitter, for instance. But their mentality is, no, I'm going to muscle through it. And we've seen what muscling through a defensive shift has happened. And if I'm not mistaken, I think the last number that I saw for the 2022 season, I think it was over 50,000 defensive shifts in the game last season.
Wow.
Give or take, in terms of that number. But everyone was doing it. And then you were looking at, now StatCast has percentages of how many at-bats that a ball player had a defensive shift against them. And now you're seeing numbers like 50, 60, 70% of the time. And, batting average doesn't matter anymore as much as like on base plus slugging. Mm-hmm. But still, it's still an eyesore seeing a 230, 220 batting average for a ball player that's hitting 40 home runs. There's a little bit of an imbalance. Yeah. So in this case here, I'm excited that we're going to see more energy on the bases, singles up the middle that could possibly turn into doubles. And the extra base taken percentage is going to be a stat that we're going to pay closer attention to.
Good. Yeah. Okay. I mean, before we move on, I knew I had a stat. It said 40% more steals in the spring training compared to last year. That's the stat I was looking at that I couldn't find there. Of course, it's spring training, so who really knows? But we'll see how it goes. I'm actually excited to watch baseball now earlier in the season to see how all of this looks. And I think that's the point. And I'm probably the guy that they're targeting by, ultimately making these rule changes. Guys like you are going to watch, it's your job and you're going to watch no matter what. And the diehard baseball fans, my parents are going to watch no matter what. But I grew up on baseball and it used to be my favorite sport, and the Giants are still my favorite sports team. So it's interesting, but okay. Moving on here. Let's talk a little bit about Aaron Judge's season last year. You're New York, at least you're a New York centric person. So what were your impressions of it? For those who don't know, I mean, you can take us through it. He hit 62 home runs. What are your thoughts on the home run record generally? And that's kind of a leading question, but let's start there.
Well, I having a front row seat to it and seeing the season Aaron Judge put together, to say it was historic is an understatement. He is just a ball player that's the personification of class and excellence, and he attacked it with great enthusiasm. And the thing is, it wasn't just about the home runs with him; it was just being the total and complete ball player on so many different levels that he didn't go up there every time trying to hit a home run. There were times he went up there and just did what the pitch he could do with it. But it is the American League record. So that's safe. That's safe to say. 62 is the American League record. We all know that the Major League record is 73, held by Barry Bonds.
Right.
And, there's philosophical differences about that. But guess what? Major League Baseball has never put an asterisk next to it, and they haven't changed it. So that's the record we abide by. But that's why we make the distinction that 62 is the American League record. And watching him play last season, you were in awe every time. And it was just a complete season, something that you're not going to see probably for generations, because it wasn't just about the home runs. It was just about the overall style of play. And here's the other thing: versatility on defense.
Yeah.
He played center field. He played right field. He was a designated hitter. He played 157 ball games with a history of injuries. So there's a lot of layers to it that go well beyond the 62 home runs. And people are going to look back, if you're not looking back already, thinking that was probably one of the top 5 seasons in baseball history.
Right. Funny, 157 games in a contract year. It typically happens in all sports that you get your most games played in a contract year. Did you think there was any chance he was not going to be a Yankee going forward?
Well, the Giants made a very strong offer, and I go back to that John Heyman tweet. I think that gave cardiac arrest to everybody
on both sides. Yeah,
and I'll never forget. As I'm a contributor to Forbes Sports Money, I'm sitting there writing a piece, getting ready, doing your notes during the winter meetings, and my initial thought, besides the shock of it, was, I guess I'm rewriting the entire article. But then, kind of settled down. So I think, I don't think he was going anywhere.
Yeah, neither do I.
Yeah, I think in my heart of hearts, he wanted to explore free agency. He had a couple of tough conversations with the Yankees back in March and April when they couldn't come to a contract extension. And that probably left a little bit of a bitter taste in his mouth. But at the end of the day, it's about the legacy. It's about the comfort. It's about the quality of the team, how much they're going to invest, even though the Giants were more than willing to invest a lot of money this offseason.
Oh, yeah.
But I think at the end of the day, he wasn't going to go anywhere. And, his heart was with the Yankees and the feeling was mutual. But we can have a very honest conversation. 9 years at $360 million. Are those final 4 or 5 years going to be worth the value that they are? And that's a legitimate conversation for all the contracts that were signed this offseason.
All right, there's a lot there. Yeah. Okay, so just so everybody understands, that tweet that you're talking about, it was John Heyman, right?
John Heyman's tweet, right. Yes.
So he what he said was that Aaron Judge had signed with the Giants, and that sent a ripple through. And he's a guy who's like, Adrian Wojnarowski for basketball, where if he tweets something like that, he's breaking news. So, and then he retracted. It's interesting that I also didn't think Judge was going to go anywhere. The longer it kind of went before, as he didn't make a decision, the less and less I thought that the Giants really had a chance. I don't know why, but it just seemed like he was kind of trying to play their offer. I mean, they came in strong and play their offer against the Yankees, which is where he ultimately wanted to stay. If I were in New York in my late 20s and making, X amount of millions a year, and I could be the king of New York City, I think that's kind of hard to pass up. I mean, just look at Jeter's life. I mean, the gift basket king. I mean, that's pretty enticing, a handsome guy doing his thing. Not a better city in the world to be the king of, which makes Jim Dolan's ownership just even more catastrophic and ununderstandable. But that's a topic for another day. And then you said one thing. Oh yes, the contracts. So we were going to get into this later, but what do you make of these contracts? I think it's pretty obvious that what you said is true. You're signing these guys for, let's call it 10 years at 35 a year. Let's just take for these super duper star guys that are coming, there's going to be 3 or 4 of them. Let's go 2 to 4 of them every offseason, let's say, unless they get taken care of by their club earlier. Which we just saw in San Diego. But what do you make of these contracts? And how long do you think that, because everything trends and ebbs and flows, how long do you see that this will continue, where you're going to sign a 30-year-old to a 10-year contract at 35 a year?
Look, I'm a little concerned. I wouldn't lie about it. The numbers this offseason have been astronomical.
Yeah.
And you look at the Padres, and the Padres are saying, "Let's go, let's play ball," and kudos to them. But right now, if I'm not mistaken, they've incurred over $1 billion in risk on contracts. And the thing I always go to: what's your definition of return on investment? The old proverbial ROI. I look at surplus value, and I look at opportunity cost. And I think, I've seen it many years covering the winter meetings for Forbes Sports Money as a contributor, was the proverbial one dumb owner. It only takes one owner that gets caught in the level of competition. Now, remember, baseball doesn't have a cap like the NBA and the NFL and the NHL. It's different. It has competitive balance tax, but it's a little more free market enterprise. We don't have the July 1st enthusiasm extravaganza like the NBA, with everyone's rushing to get everything squared away. So that's why you have the trickle. Aaron Judge's free agency went on for a month.
Yep.
And so I look at it as the new collective bargaining agreement was signed. People were very excited. There was a lot of extraordinary talent out on the market. It's guaranteed money. Teams wanted that talent. But at the end of the day, it's about return on investment. How do you define surplus value? And some of these contracts, if not most of them, are going to become financial albatrosses. And how do you do that? Like in a case like Aaron Judge, okay, the Yankees were in a position they had to do it. They probably wanted to go about 6 years, but they wound up going 9.
Yeah.
But then what they'll say is, well, he won a couple of MVPs for us. We won a couple of championships. We can justify it. But what happens if he gets injured? And what happens if the second half of his career? So, a lot of the analysts are saying, 30 is like the new 25 when it comes to assessing talent because of the medical care and the training and the conditioning the athletes have today. Yeah. But I always look at
I don't buy that. Yeah.
Yeah, I always look at it from the perspective that being a professional athlete, it's very fragile, and you just don't know. So I'm always going to err on the side of caution. Now, I hope that all these ball players are healthy and have fantastic careers. Right. That goes without saying. But reality tells us that they're going to hit a wall at some point in time. And when does it happen? And how much are the teams it's going to set them back, because it is guaranteed money. It's not like the NFL.
They get every dollar. You're right.
Yeah, they get everything. And then how do you assess value in terms of ancillary revenues, whether it be a regional sport network, merchandising, ticket sales, streaming, all of these different things. So I'm concerned. I think the bubble's going to burst. Because of the whole RSN market. So I think teams are going to kind of dial it back. Particularly if you're the Mets and the Padres, I don't know how much more you can spend.
Right. The Mets doesn't seem like they have any sort of cap, though.
Here's the thing with that. They do, because for right now, Steve Cohen wants to put the best quality product on the field, but eventually he wants to rebuild the farm system. Right. The Mets were in such a position that he had to spend to get them to a level of competitiveness to start to rebuild the brand. So it was a real bigger thing than just the over-the-top spending. He has a game plan in place.
Interesting. Wow. A lot of my Met fans friends that listen to this are going to be very excited about this, what you just said, that he has an actual plan in place. You don't hear that.
Here's what you have to look at, because everyone's just looking at the spending. You got to look beyond it. He wants to build a highly successful, sustainable franchise. And that's only going to happen if you have a very healthy farm system, because baseball has that cost containment strategy of 6 years until free agency. Yeah. So what he's doing right now is a lot of heavy spending because the team was in bad shape. And now he's got them to a really good position on all fronts. But it's not a sustainable model for him. Regardless of the billions of dollars that he's worth, the Mets are going to want to rebuild their farm system, and they're going to do it. So I think people have to take this with a grain of salt. And the Padres are looking at it as one-shot opportunity. Stars are aligning right now. This isn't a long-term. Well, now for them, it's going to be a long-term thing with the contracts. But it's not going to be this long thing that this is going to be their business model forever in terms of the spending. They can't. It's not sustainable.
Yeah, that one actually is a little more surprising to me, only because nobody goes to their games. I've been there. It's a great park. San Diego, people are eating Mexican food and surfing. They're not going to, when they're good and in the playoffs, but yeah, the ROI on that's going to be really interesting. We're going to get to the RSN thing after, so we'll carry that on for people who don't know that. Keep listening. Real quick, compare Judge's season to Bonds' season in 01, and then we're going to go to the Hall of Fame on that. So,
wow, that's great. That's a great point. Look, I guess right now we're dealing with the whole thing that, hindsight's 2020 in terms of now what we know and don't know and stuff. I was in awe of both. Look, I've always been in awe of Barry Bonds because the one thing I've always told people, you can't teach hand-eye coordination, and I've seen that ball player up close and personal. I've never seen anything cricket like that in my life. Yes, he had some gargantuan muscles and stuff along those lines, but
certainly did.
Yes, but I will say this in all fairness, just to be real honest about it. He was born with a God-given gift of a superior hand-eye coordination, and that's a primary skill in being an elite baseball player, and he had it. I was just flat out in awe of Judge because of how complete of a ball player he was, given his size, given his injury history, and the versatility in the positions to which he played and how he remained on the field. And like I said, one of the top 5 seasons we're ever going to see. But Bonds was always someone that I was in awe of. And, we are wrestling with that PED cloud, and it's a very sad commentary that we are.
Okay, yeah, we're going to drill down on that on a second. Okay, but to me, so I'm from the Bay Area, and I say this to people, you could talk about it's unfair to compare even athletes in the same sport, but when you talk about Michael Jordan, okay, and his inevitability in winning championships, where you just felt he's unstoppable when it matters. When it matters, the aura of that nothing compares to Barry Bonds to me. The fear, the dominance, people don't understand unless you watched all his at-bats around the time where he started undoubtedly taking steroids. His head grew at age 39. His feet grew. I mean, that's just not normal activity. Okay. So he definitely took steroids. I've never seen anybody so feared. The numbers of him getting walked intentionally with the bases loaded, the numbers of where he would see one good pitch a series and hit it out. Now, if he didn't swing, they hardly ever called strike. To be fair, okay, this is what it became. Watching him in left field in the games, my dad has quarter season tickets, so I go 20 games a year. Watching him in left field is the single funniest thing I've ever seen a superstar do. Where if it's a foul ball, he wouldn't move unless he thought he could catch it. So it could land, right. It could hang up in the air and land right on the mound that the guys warm up on. He wouldn't move. He wouldn't be anywhere near it. It could land it fair. He'd start going. If he didn't think he'd get it, he wouldn't move. If he thought it was a home run, he'd just turn. He'd just turn behind him. I just did it. That's why I moved away from the mic and just look at it. And sometimes it hit the wall, and you're like, oh God. And the guy won Gold Gloves. So he was always. It was not nice to the media. All of that, I give you all that. He's the most dominant athlete I've ever seen, and it's not even close. I never seen anything like the fear and the respect and just the overall dominance in his sport. If he saw as many pitches as Sosa and McGuire had seen when they were on their home run chase, he'd hit 85 home runs, maybe 90. I mean, it would have been insane. It would have been insane. Thoughts on that? Yeah.
The thing that jumps out at me all the time is I saw Barry Bonds hit a home run in the old Yankee Stadium, and that ball still hasn't landed.
Yeah.
And for someone who grew up in Yankee Stadium, grew up in the old ballpark, and we're talking the upper deck, and everyone was excited to see him in that ballpark. So I was, you mentioned the at bats. that was must-watch TV, regardless of where you are, because one of two things was going to happen. He was going to hit the ball a country mile, or they weren't going to pitch to him. Mm-hmm. And if you look at his numbers, and then we know they're artificially inflated, and mm-hmm. we can get into that. But I go back to the pure, unadulterated natural athleticism that he had, and look at it from that perspective, because there is a sense of melancholy here, because to your point, he was probably one of the greatest baseball players to have ever lived. And to your point as well, the athletes of the generations.
Right.
But we're dealing, instead of him being a surefire first ballot Hall of Famer with a minimum of 98% of the vote, which, mm-hmm. 2% wouldn't vote for him because of the surly personality.
Right. Which is ridiculous, but yes.
Exactly. But now we're dealing with this whole situation, which, it hurts the game, because that whole generation, it's tainted. Instead of us stepping back and saying, one, he never needed to take anything but a vitamin. He didn't even need to take a vitamin because of the God-given natural talents and abilities he's had. But the culture within the game was so toxic and polluted during that period of time that everyone was succumbing to peer pressure. And on top of it, the extraordinary money that ball players were starting to sign for. And we're seeing those, now we're starting to see those 9-figure contracts. Thank you, Kevin Brown. And mm-hmm. the game is starting to change a little bit. So,
Kevin
and then
Brown. Funny name. Yeah.
Blast,
blast from the past. Yeah.
So, so there was a lot going on that Major League Baseball turned a blind eye, mm-hmm. and a lot of the reporters too. So there's a lot of people to blame, because no one wanted to ruin the story, the McGwire-Sosa story, and then Bonds' story.
Totally.
And then we realized that the game was just a proliferation throughout the game. But in all fairness, that's the wrong choice of word. The sad commentary on it is Bonds and Clemens have become the poster children for it. And with all due respect, there are a heck of a lot of other ball players that were using just as much as they were. And some of them have received significant honors, while Bonds and Clemens still are viewed as the only, really, hey, we're going to punish them, but other people kind of got a free pass.
Well, most didn't, right? McGwire, A-Rod, Sosa, Palmeiro, Clemens, Bonds, none of them are in the Hall of Fame, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so just explain quickly, because we're dancing around a topic. Explain quickly that the process of getting in the Hall of Fame, just quickly.
Sure. Yeah. Get minimum 10 years playing. Mm-hmm. 5 years after your retirement, you go to a vote among the Baseball Writers Association of America, probably a handful, like 400 or so writers. You need to get 75% of the vote. You have 10 years on the ballot, as long as you get at least 5% of the vote every year. And Bonds, Schilling, and Clemens, and Sosa, mm-hmm. they did not get it, and Bonds and Clemens got moved to a new Veterans Committee vote that are voted on by Hall of Famers and media members and stuff like that. So they're in a whole different category right now.
Right. Okay. So they can get voted on later on, after the 10 years on the ballot, in another mechanism.
Yes.
And so far they've been on 1 year. Mm-hmm. Bond specific, and he didn't get anywhere near what he needed. Okay,
not even close.
Okay, so that's an encapsulation of what's going on. Okay, so my perspective on this is similar to yours, but I gotta say, as somebody who remembers baseball, so there was a strike in 94, 95. Okay. And they canceled 1,000 games. They canceled the 94 postseason, I believe. And there was no World Series that year, etc. Okay. And you were there, Wayne. You remember I was a 10-year-old or whatever, 12 years old. And I remember nobody was at these games. Nobody was watching these games. It really set baseball back a tremendous amount, as it was probably the beginning of the end, really, of it being America's game, from my perspective. Maybe you disagree with that, but the point is then Sosa and McGwire happened. They had a home run chase when they were big and burly and probably had a lot of back acne, and their head grew and their feet grew, and they captured the nation They captured the nation. It was to your point about Bonds, this was must-see TV for people who were not baseball fans, and they would like, you know, do that fake like uppercut, punch each other thing, and it was like this whole thing. They were like different. One was from here, one was not, etc. Like, it was great. Everybody celebrated it. Baseball was back. Bonds happened. He continued it. Okay. 3 years later or whatever it was, 2-3 years later. And he hit 73 home runs after McGwire hit 70. And he was celebrated. There was the backlash had started a bit, but you know, baseball, there was no backlash with baseball. And they brought people back in the seats. They brought baseball back on the forefront of America's televisions and minds of the people of America, and they saved the game, to be honest, from my perspective. Now, maybe it would have been saved another way, but it certainly brought the sport back from where it was financially. It propelled it. So to me, the idea that, you know, the Hall of Fame is so stupid to me, just in general, but the idea that these guys aren't in the Hall of Fame, if you're going to have a Hall of Fame, is insanely hypocritical. It's insanely hypocritical. They did more. Those three specific guys, to me, did more for the game than any three guys in my lifetime have. And I can say that with certainty. And so if they're not in the Hall of Fame with their inflated numbers, what are we having a Hall of Fame for? Now, can you put something on the plaque? You know, a little asterisk. They were, you know, accused of cheating, or they tested positive, depending on who it is, etc. You know, why can't we do that? Why can't we have a hall where, you know, a wing where the steroid guys are? But the idea that they're not in the Hall of Fame, the idea that baseball is not, like, the history of baseball is told in these museums, and the idea that these guys aren't in these museums makes no sense to me.
It's a very interesting observation, just for the fact that it's very complicated, because, you know, if you ever been to the Baseball Hall of Fame, to me, it's a very special place.
I've been there. Yeah,
it's a lot of reverence. But you walk through the plaque gallery, and my mind goes to, okay, there's some racists, there's some bigots.
There's been cheating, and there's been cheating throughout baseball's history. Yeah, also, yes,
there's some pretty morally reprehensible people who have plaques there. And, you know, cheating has been a part of the subculture of baseball for a very long time. You know, you look at Gaylord Perry, you know, God rest his soul, he recently passed away, but, you know, he was kind of celebrated for throwing a spitball,
right?
You know, for a very long time. Now, the steroid situation of the 90s, and, well, I'll say late 80s, with starting with Jose Canseco and the Bash brothers, going into the early 2000s, it got completely out of control.
No doubt.
And the thing is, Major League Baseball has a lot of blood on its hands from it.
Tremendous.
Because they could have taken the bull by the horns, and they chose not to. To your point, which was so well said, that you come out from a strike, you come out from this horrible situation, you lost all these games, you cancel a World Series, people don't want to go to baseball games, you lost all this money. So we see a couple of guys starting to hit 450, 500-foot home runs, and people are coming back, and there's interest. And, oh, by the way, Nike comes out with the whole advertising campaign, Chicks Dig the Long Ball.
Yep.
And people are buying into it. And know what it was? It was happening with the Cardinals. It happened with the Cubs. Middle America franchises, historic franchises, pulling on the heartstrings. So this was like basically a script written for Hollywood. And who wants to ruin that? And then we come across, in our opinions, before all this started to happen, the greatest player in baseball, probably in the past 50 years, now going after 73 home runs.
Yep.
And then, you know, we get introduced to Androstine Dione. We get introduced to, you could get it at GNC. Then we get introduced to Balco. And we get introduced to all these different things, and realizing the price of fame and glory for baseball went through pharmaceutical enhancements. And baseball and a lot of reporters just said, "When see no evil, hear no evil." 70 million fans are coming out to ball games every year after a strike. We're going to shut our mouth and we're going to continue. And I think a lot of people have a lot of guilt about it because it's created for us this period of murkiness and melancholy and uncertainty because we forget how good Roger Clemens was, how Barry Bonds was. We just see them through that one lens when in fact it was a proliferation throughout the sport.
It's really one of the things that frustrates me about baseball. It really is, and it makes me as a fan. It's when I read these Hall of Fame stories, it just I don't know. Maybe because I'm a Barry Bonds like super fan, which might be part of my problem. But I don't know. I think what you just said is dead on. Which leads me to my next thing. I mean, Bud Selig to me, he was in charge 17 years, I believe. And when you talk about people with blood on their hands, he was around through a lot of all of this, and he did some good things and he did some bad things. And my issue with him is what we just kind of laid out. But that brings us to Rob Manfred. What do you think? What do you think of Manfred? He's been the commissioner since 15, I believe. What do you think of the job he's done? You mentioned RSNs. You can tell the people a little bit about that.
Sure.
What are your thoughts there?
So I think the jury's still out, to be honest with you. If if I had to give a grade, I'd probably say an incomplete right now because there's been some good things, without question. I'm still kind of bothered by the whole lockout in terms of the way it was handled in the off season when, clearly there was a lot of animosity and anger between the owners and players, but the owners did not look that great in December when the season wasn't going on, when you possibly could have said, let's extend it a couple of weeks and continue the conversations instead of taking that hard line. Yeah. You brought the game to a grinding halt. I think this is Commissioner Manfred, someone who's really trying. And I think he's identified, look, there's some things I need to work on, and he's definitely trying to do that. I love the engagement with youth. I love the interest in trying to get into the digital aspects of society right now. I love the idea of looking at ways to improve the game in terms of speeding it up. But you also have to remember, he is a hardcore labor lawyer who's worked in baseball economics for almost 30 years now. So his perspective is very, very narrow, and he's fought a lot of battles. I always thought that I thought he was at his best when he was collaborating with the former executive director of the MLBPA, Michael Weiner. I thought that was a marriage made in heaven for both of them, where the game could have grown, but unfortunately, Michael passed away a couple of years ago. And kind of, I think it soured what the positivity that was happening in the game. So for me, it's a little bit of an incomplete. I think it would be unfair to say he's wonderful. I think it would be unfair to say he's horrible. There's been some good things. There's been areas of improvement. I really do believe that he could have probably handled that whole lockout situation a little bit better. And now I think he's going to he's thinking in the right direction in terms of how to shift this game around in terms of RSNs and digital technology.
All right, so explain that. Explain RSNs and digital technology quickly. You just wrote a piece on it, and we'll link to it because people gotta understand what we're doing here. Wayne's gonna make you smarter. Okay, everybody. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that, and then. Yeah.
So right now everyone's a cord cutter. So no one's really having cable and satellite television subscriptions. Everyone's streaming. Yep. And baseball's business model right now is built on cable and satellite deals with networks like ESPN and TBS and Fox. So there's not a lot of money to be made in RSNs anymore, regional sport networks where local media rights are used for the teams. So companies like Diamond Sports Group, who oversee Bally Sports Group, and Warner Brothers Discovery are saying we're done with RSNs. We're getting out of that business. And Major League Baseball has more than half of its franchises right now that are tied up into it, who in a couple of days might not have local broadcast rights with a provider. So we're still waiting to hear on that. So
What
really,
happens if that happens?
so right now the game. Sure.
Everything becomes accessible on MLB.com, basically.
Yeah, so essentially MLB.com is going to work. The MLB network and MLB.com are going to work overdrive. So that means that Commissioner Manfred is going to have to go to like Comcast and Charter and negotiate, local broadcast rights for all, like at least 17 teams, and then hopefully can stream these games on MLB.com.
Interesting.
But you need to have some type of collaboration with a cable and satellite provider. So it really could be an absolute mess and disaster for Major League Baseball. But the good thing out of it is it's going to force Major League Baseball to think of new and exciting ways for distribution that's going to positively affect the game going forward. So it's going to get messy. It'll get messy before it gets a heck of a lot better.
So interesting that you say that. So like the unfortunately for baseball, it's their viewership has just gotten older, right? It's like us, me, you, Wayne, we're the same age. And then like my parents, my kids, I mean, I brought my 5-year-old to a Marlins game, and he's like, what is this sport? But like, yeah, I mean, America's youth and now are like, let's call them, 15, 20-year-olds. See, what the NBA did that was smart, right, is that they allowed all social media companies in there when they were just kind of starting. They didn't prevent their content from ending up on any social media platform, even in like 30-second clips, 60-second clips. David Stern and then Adam Silver has carried that forward. They really understood before it became really apparent and obvious that the more exposure, the better, and especially for the youth, which is who's on social media. So I think it's really interesting what you just said, because the idea that my parents are going to, go on their TV remote, their Apple TV remote, and figure out how to turn on the Giants game. Yeah, it's going to be that'll be quite the experience for them. They're not the most tech savvy people, but yeah, innovation I think is good when it comes to that kind of thing. I think, figuring out a way to engage youth, I think is the most important thing to all these leagues.
Well, the thing is, look, in all honesty, they have us. Yeah. Now, has it been frustrating, like being someone who's been a lifelong Yankee fan and still works in the area in terms of media and everything? Now, I need 5 different modes of watching the Yankees in Chapel Hill, because there's not a lot of Yankee fans at, Chapel Hill. Right. So you're getting Peacock, you're getting MLB.TV, you're going to have to get, some type of other ESPN and TBS. And then what the Yankees do, which is even worse, which it's innovative, very innovative, but worse if you're a fan out of market. They put 21 of their games on Amazon through Amazon Prime. So if you don't have an Amazon subscription in the tri-state area, you can't watch those games. So what we're seeing right now is the leagues want to go streaming, but the way they're going about it, it's very clumsy because they know they're beholden to satellite and cable television. And no, it's not anyone's fault, but they're realizing we got to grow the game. The only way to do it is through streaming. But it's like they're trying to swim in a pool and they have a weight, wrapped around their waist. Yeah. And they're just trying to keep going because they know that they have to go in this direction. It's the best interest of the game, but they're just struggling right now. They're going to get there.
Yeah, they'll get it.
It's going to be messy before they get to the finish line.
Well, it's interesting also because professional sports, right, and sports in general, collegiate sports as well, and then award shows, right? Those are the only 2 things that you really have to watch live that people think they have to watch live now. Everything else you stream, you catch up on. Even what's the last can't miss TV show? What was the HBO show with everybody flying around? Whatever that show was. That was like the last time that everybody had to be in front of their TV.
Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones. Thank you. Thank you. It's funny when you're podcasting and you can't remember something that's so obvious. But yes, thank you. Game of Thrones, and that I remember. Like you couldn't not watch Game of Thrones because then if you went on Twitter, it would be spoiled for you. Or if you watched even the evening news, potentially it could get spoiled for you. But anyways, it's interesting. Professional sports are in a really interesting position that way. And I think that's what ultimately propels them monetarily in the near future and in the not so near future. It's just because they're the only game in town that people still feel like they need to be in front of a TV for.
It's important because, as someone who works with I work with a lot of student athletes and at Chapel Hill, and they're amazing. And I'll ask them, you got cable? No, I'm streaming. How many streaming services you have? Well, I got 5 or 7. And they don't like, I always tell them when the Yes Network came out, early 2000s, and there was a little bit of a dispute between Cablevision and the Yankees and the S Network. Those games were only put on satellite TV, not on cable. And that was a major inconvenience for fans in the tri-state area at that point in time. Now, the big inconvenience is the blackout. So think of it this way. If you're a baseball fan who lives in Las Vegas, you're blacked out of every team that plays baseball in California. And how unfortunate is that? Because how are you building your audience when Nevada's not too far from California, right, and you can't watch it? So
the goal should be to build the audience. Yes. Yeah. Yes. The goal should be to build the audience. It's interesting. Well, they're in an interesting time. I'm interested to see how it all plays out for really all the sports that way, because they're all kind of grappling with the same stuff, and it's going to be a lot of throw stuff against the wall and see what works. So we'll see. All right, let me get you out of here on two last questions. Quick ones. Ohtani. He's a free agent at the end of this year. It seems unlikely that him and the Angels will come to an agreement before the end of the year. Where do you think he plays the 2024 season?
2 teams to watch out for: Mariners and the Mets.
Mariners.
Don't sell the Mariners short.
Wow.
I think the preference would be to stay on the West Coast. For geography reasons. That was one of the reasons why he wanted to go to the Angels. And don't ever underestimate Steve Cohen.
Steve Cohen, for sure. Okay, last question. I ask all my guests this that I have time to. What are your thoughts on Kyrie Irving?
11 games at Duke, 1 and done. I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed because I think there could have been something special in Brooklyn with James Harden and Kevin Durant and him. And I'm just very disappointed. That's probably the best word I would describe because I thought that they could have done something pretty special, and it was more drama. Very talented basketball player, very enjoyable to watch, but the drama at times could be exhausting.
To say the least. Well, we're very anti-faux intellectual on this show, and so I have to ask all my guests that. And Wayne, this has been a true pleasure. You're a wealth of baseball knowledge. We're going to link to all of your stuff. Your last article was great. That was on Forbes. I read it in preparation for this. It was much. I mean, I understood by 20% of the words in there, but really appreciate having you on, and hope we can do it again soon.
Joel, this was an absolute pleasure. Thank you for this opportunity, and love to talk to you again soon.
All right, Wayne. Have a good day, man.
Same to you.
All right, we're back with the segment everybody's dying for, Rapid Fire with Oliver Abelson. Oliver, how you doing today?
Bad.
Oh, why? You want to share?
Bad.
Oh, okay. Aura from San Mateo wants to know, who would win in a fight, Harry Potter or your dad?
Harry Potter.
Harry Potter? Right. What would he say? Expelliarmus.
Yeah, Expelliarmus.
Right.
Expelliarmus.
Exactly. Sam Simon from Miami
wants to
know, how young is too young to get Botox from Aunt Jerrielle?
2 months.
2 months. Good answer. And finally, Mom from downstairs. What's the naughtiest thing you've ever done?
Stole a snack.
Oh. That's it? Stole snacks?
Yep.
All right. Anything else you want to say to the people? Nope. You're out of here? All right, dude. See you later. Alligator.